Hello again and welcome into another edition of Last Call. Some different faces this week. Not Jake Kiefer, not Nathaniel Finch. They'll take the week off here and we'll still get you the same sports lines. Graham Shear alongside Sam Gailey for today's edition. A little bit later we'll have Landon Coons, Giselle Valentine, and Liam Blaze joining us here on Last Call. But for now, we're still going to start with UIndy Sports, and the football team, Sam, got off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, they did. They traveled to Pittsburgh State for the first NCAA tournament appearance this year. Their quarterback, though, struggling just a little bit. Christian Conkling, usually a reliable quarterback, only going for 15 for 35 in this game. But that's not the stat line we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about those 5 key interceptions. Definitely that impacted this game, which they unfortunately lost 35-0. Graham, but there were some positives there definitely about their rushing defense.
Yeah, definitely some positives. Obviously, UIndy's run defense is the best in the nation coming into this Saturday's performance against Pittsburgh State, and they just really weren't able to get off to a hot start. Testimony to that to the Gorillas offense, a 98-yard kick return to start off the game, and the Greyhounds were just immediately falling behind.
Definitely, that's not how you want to start off a game. With a 98-yard touchdown return, that's pretty insane. But let's talk about the Pittsburgh State quarterback, Chad Dotson Jr., actually dotting up the Indianapolis Greyhounds, going 18 for 26 for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception himself. Definitely exposing that zone and man defense throughout the game.
And with UIndy having the best run defense, they only gave up 36 yards on the ground on Saturday. One of their best running backs, Caleb Lewis, he only had 15 yards on the game. So that run defense was really working on Saturday. But again, the storyline you just mentioned, Chad Dotson Jr., he comes in, he's having a great season, and he does so again on Saturday, a great game. He was 18 of 26 on the day, 255 yards through the air. He was looking around the field. He was absolutely shredding apart this UIndy defense. And the secondary for UIndy is kind of something I want to focus on now because they were just giving up a lot of what they've given up throughout the season. They've given up a lot of deep plays, and they kind of played that bend, don't break defense where they give up the big plays, but essentially they keep the guys in front of them. On Saturday, they just didn't do that against the Gorillas.
I think definitely when we're talking about a defense, it has to be complementary football. Right? You have to have a good defense accompanied by a good offense. Unfortunately for the UIndy Greyhounds, that offense just didn't come in the ways that you want it to. Over the season, each game, the Indianapolis Greyhounds averaged about 112 yards, give or take, per game. That's our average on the ground. On Saturday against Pittsburgh State, 91 yards in total. Their star running back, Toriano Clinton, 16 attempts for 56 yards. That's just not good enough to be able to have that ground and pound offense that we like to see.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Toriano Clinton because he didn't have a great game this past Saturday against Truman State either. 2 Saturdays ago in what was the GLVC title game, essentially, where the Greyhounds ended up beating the Bulldogs. They beat Truman State, and they come away with their 8th GLVC title. But Tori kind of had a slow start in that game as well. Finished with under 30 yards rushing in that game, but over the course of the season had well over 1,000 yards rushing and just had a great day. One thing UIndy did well, though, against Truman State was they were able to pass the ball. Christian Conkling had a great day, and as you alluded to, those 6 turnovers, 5 picks, and a fumble just isn't good enough from a quarterback standpoint when you're trying to come away with a Division II victory, especially in the playoffs. The 6 turnovers just doesn't cut it.
So, speaking of better news, both basketball teams, both women's and men's basketball, actually were away this weekend. Let's start with the women's game. They traveled to Northwood. They actually won a really tough game, nitty-gritty game, 74-71. Do you have any key players or key stat lines for us today?
Oh, definitely. Probably my biggest key player from really the last couple of games, last handful, Sadie Hill. She got off to a slow start on the year, wasn't playing that well, wasn't finishing on the inside in the paint. Just an awful shooting percentage for the first 2 games. Now, the last 2 games, it's just been a different story. She had over 15 points against Hillsdale and now 17 points, leading scorer against Northwood this past Saturday. Played an outstanding game, also had 6 rebounds. Sadie Hill, a senior, is just one of the biggest leaders on Mark Mitchell's side of things. When you look at the bench, though, that's where a couple of the biggest storylines came from, because Lauren With came off the bench, had 15 points, knocks down 2 of 3 from behind the arc, 6 of 10 from the field overall, and also 4 rebounds for With, 11 points off the bench for Elena Wells. Mark Mitchell decides to bring her off the bench on Saturday's game, and she gives him 11 points, 6 assists, 3 for 4 from behind the arc. Just a great day for the Greyhounds overall, and as you mentioned, a nitty-gritty win. They were able to tough it out, and they were able to play a full 40 minutes of basketball, one thing Mark Mitchell has been looking for all season long from his players.
All right, that's a great win from the UIndy women's basketball team. Let's move on to the men's. Another win as they traveled to Grand Valley State. Graham, you were there as well. Very busy weekend for you travel-wise, I bet. But they get the wins, 72-66. Is that a convincing win for you?
Oh, absolutely. An extremely convincing win for the Greyhounds. They played Grand Valley State, who came in 2-1. They had lost earlier this season to Southwest Baptist, another opponent that the Greyhounds will have to face later this year. Now, later in the season, when they get into the GLVC play, they're going to have to play Southwest Baptist, a great team. But Grand Valley State is another one of those great teams. They're in the GLIAC Conference, and they come in 2-1 on the season thus far in Cornell Mann's first year with the Lakers, and UIndy was really able to take advantage of the defense, especially in the first half. In the first half, they go on a couple runs, they go off to a big lead, and coming into halftime, they were up by 7 points. Big testimony to that, too, off the bench, 42 bench points on Sunday from UIndy. Those 42 bench points, that's 42 of their 72 overall on Sunday's matchup. 11 from Bruno Williams, coming over from Lewis, all GLVC second team last year. 11 points from David Eja off the bench. 9 from Jarvis Walker. You just look down the list of these UIndy Greyhounds, and it's just a huge testimony to what Paul Corsaro has been able to build with the Greyhounds, especially going down the bench. The 5 starters, all returning players, but the next 5 off the bench is really where the Greyhounds have taken a big step forward and coming in on the year #1 in the GLVC coaches poll.
Definitely. I mean, in basketball, I believe that if you have a deep bench and a bench that can contribute to the game like UIndy's, we're going to go far.
And with the Greyhounds in the starting lineup, though, had a chance to sit down and talk with Jesse Bingham post-game yesterday after that big win over Grand Valley State. Finishes with 11 points, the redshirt sophomore. But big thing we talked about was his leadership role. It's a new leadership role. Corey Miller Jr. graduating last year. He's gone, and that's one thing that he did a lot with last year with the Greyhounds. One thing that Corey Miller did was give the Greyhounds a bucket when they really needed it. Now he's gone. Who was going to fill that role? Jesse Bingham filled that role on Sunday and led the Greyhounds to a 6-point come-from-behind big win down the stretch.